I'm so flattered and honored to be part of this presentation hosted by G. Edward Griffin. I loved his book, Creature from Jekyll Island. And I'd also like to say hello to my dear friend, colleague, and inspiration, Clarice Ryan, who has been fighting you on Agenda 21 here in Montana for 20 years. I'd also like to say hello to the esteemed guest, Randy Pinocci, who is from the Montana legislature. You'll be happy to know, Randy, that Representative Teresa Manzello was able to get a hold of Deborah Lamb, and we sat her down with my lawyers after they briefed Donald Trump's lawyers on our water compact and the profound national security implications that treaty has brought to Montana. Michael Shaw is one of my heroes. When it comes to Agenda 21, I never miss anything that he puts out. Mr. Randall Jordan, Debbie Arnold, Dan Blackburn, my dear friend Dan Happel, and my dear friend Debbie Baccaciolupi. I'd like to say hello to all of you folks, and thank you for holding this very important conference. What I hope to accomplish is to point out that NAFTA, the foreclosure crisis, wool reintroduction, and the monetization of our water is all a rigged transaction, rigged trade that has its roots in UN Agenda 21. And I think I better start at the beginning, because I just turned 66, and I'm kind of a weird duck. I started on Wall Street in 1974, thanks to the fact that my dad was one of the most successful brokers in the industry back then. I was fresh out of the University of Notre Dame and was given an opportunity that most middle-aged men only get after they've proven themselves elsewhere. And I seized upon that opportunity and studied and prepared and worked as hard as possible and became what I had built myself when I was a Montana gubernatorial candidate as a financial genius. So my mother's from Memphis. She taught all of her 6 sons to be humble, and that was not in compliance with her wishes, but it's the truth. When we had the financial meltdown of September of 2008, I was considered a pretty smart guy back at the Board of Trade, and I flew to Chicago on the 22nd of December and met with my old friend Charlie Carey, who was the chairman of the Chicago Board of Trade and the co-chair of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, to explain to him exactly what happened with the financial meltdown of 2008. It was a rigged trade. It was financial engineers in collusion with social engineers that stole your home equity, stole the home equity of the American people, and it was done with complex financial instruments, special investment vehicles, known as collateralized debt obligations, and the OTC derivatives attached to them, known as credit default swaps. What I hope to accomplish in a room full of politicians, aspiring politicians, and some of the smartest minds in UN Agenda 21 is to point out the fact that these were carefully orchestrated trades worth of jobs with NAFTA, and those jobs were key to national defense, like tires and steel. All of those jobs were shipped offshore. Those jobs were not debt on the balance sheet. They were not assets on the balance sheet. They were equity. It was equity that America was stripped of. You can read more about that in a book that Pat Buchanan sent me, written by John R. MacArthur, called The Selling of Free Trade. Also, you can look at an article written by one of my favorite finance writers, Catherine Austin Fitz, where she quantified the $23 trillion that were shipped out of the United States of America. One of the big players in shipping those jobs offshore was proponent of NAFTA, who is also considered to be the champion of American labor. That was Dick Gephardt. Dick Gephardt, as champion of American labor, was also a key mover and shaker of NAFTA, and he now is one of the highest paid lobbyists. His firm is one of the highest paid lobbying firms in Washington, D.C. We also have the foreclosures crisis, where we have a pump and dump of American real estate prices. Well, the pump was a direct result of the Bank of International Settlements, Alan Greenspan, Alpha director. Greenspan walked into the Bank for International Settlements and demanded that back in 2001, he demanded that real estate be given double collateral value on the balance sheets. Real estate twice as important as things like Caterpillar tractors, receivables. And that Alpha director got his way, and you can find in Der Spiegel, if you go into their search engine, and you plug in the words William White, Bank for International Settlements, and William White came in here to Jackson Hole, Wyoming in 2003 and said that what you're doing, Mr. Greenspan, he said it in front of the entire G20, what you're doing, Mr. Greenspan, is creating systemic risk, which we then realized by September of 2008. So when you get a hold of people in high positions and authority, they've abused their power. And by abusing their power, they can pass laws or choose to not enforce laws. We had Mr. William K. Black, who told us that the reason that we had a financial meltdown is that the Federal Reserve refused to enforce their own anti-fraud rules. And the way that they got away with that is the chairman of the Federal Reserve is chosen by lottery, and you pay to get in the lottery, and the usual winners, all the time winners, is either Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan. And I'm here to tell you that as a professional trader with 40 years under my belt, I'm here to tell you that whether it's Robert Rubin, Goldman Sachs, Henry Paulson, or George Soros, trading is the ability to find something undervalued away out of a wet paper bag. The only way that they're able to make these enormous returns is by gaming the system, having trades, and knowing what's going to happen in advance in order to place their leverage positions in place. And so the American people have been victims, at least since NAFTA, of rigged trades, people setting up macro trades in order to fleece the American people, whether they're fleecing them out of their jobs, whether they're fleecing them out of their home equity, whether they're fleecing them out of a hunting industry. In Montana's case, a $231.7 million hunting industry and 20,000 head of elk. And here in the northern herd, that's what got me involved in politics, is when they attacked our game herds here in Montana with forced wolf introduction. Forced wolf introduction by gaming the rules and stealing $45 to $60 million from the Pittman-Robertson Trust, but that's a different story. And then recently, we in Montana have been the victims of the federal government's attempt to monetize water, steal our water on behalf of hedge funds in New York City. And that's at the detriment of our agricultural industry. Agriculture, and especially beef production, is considered to be unsustainable. And so since it's not sustainable, there's their justification, alleged justification of stealing the water. And along with the water comes the electricity that it generates. So our attorneys have discovered that there is massive amounts of corruption, not only at the federal level, but at the state level, involved in the theft of an asset class that is essential to our largest industry here in Montana, the agricultural industry. So we have filed litigation in Washington, D.C., and we're moving that ball down the field as we speak. So I think I've gone through the various ways that the UN Agenda 21 has inspired these takings. And the way I like to begin my discussions is speaking about regulatory capture, regulatory arbitrage, and regulatory takings. So when you have these oligarchs, they need to capture the regulators or the lawmakers, and they, whether it's with campaign finance bribery or direct bribery coming from places like the Muslim world, we have massive amounts of corruption that are paying for some laws to be passed and other laws to be ignored. And treason has become a cottage industry. High treason, putting the public at great risk and harm with the introduction of ISIS, groups like that, into our 326 Indian says that because there is a compatibility between Islam and Native American spirituality, 17 Indian tribes were brought over to Turkey, and they all came to an agreement that they are kindred spirits, spiritually, which then makes it possible for those Indians to lease their ground to ISIS, Turkish Grey Wolves, MS-13, whoever they want, without the scrutiny of the FBI, the DHS, or even the Bureau of Indian Affairs. But I'm ahead of myself. If you can get a hold of federal or now state lawmakers, the payoffs are blinding in terms of frequency and size. And the meltdown of 2008 was a direct result of regulatory capture in the 106th Congress. The 106th Congress, thanks to Greenspan and Rubin, Larry Summers, the 106th Congress passed the Commodity Modernization Act. They passed the Security Modernization Act, and they repealed one of the greatest protectors of the American financial system, the Glass-Steagall Act. And so, once those things took place in the 106th Congress, and Alan Greenspan was able to get his pump and dump going, which is forever now known as the Greenspan put, we were able to pump up American real estate, put the credit default swaps in place, load those collateralized debt obligations, especially investment vehicles, with targeted credit default swaps, and then when the collapse came, the credit default swaps paid off. Mr. Henry Paulson got on his knees, begged Nancy Pelosi, and she gave him $787 billion in order to make good on credit default swaps, in order to pay, for the most part, foreigners. So America's wealth and the American middle class's real estate wealth was shipped overseas, thanks to an orchestrated trade, a rigged trade. And if you know that the trade is coming and when it's coming, and it came right before the election of 2008, if you know it's coming, then you can, if you know about trading leverage, put some calls, credit default swaps, that sort of thing. Then you can really leverage your money if you know the timeline. They knew what was going to happen and when it happened. And when it did happen, the money was shipped offshore. $175 billion worth was shipped to Bank Paribas. And the owner of Bank Paribas is a major Obama contributor, and they got $175 billion. That's just one of a list of banks as long as your arm. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I was fortunate enough to go to Wall Street at the age 23. Graduated from the University of Notre Dame in 73. And I was a major in biology, sociology. I got my MBA at night while I worked. And I had a father that I wanted to make sure that I made him proud. And I got my head into complex finance. And by the age of 25, I had done the largest silver straddle, tax straddle. It's how you move a capital gain from one year to the next. I've done the largest butterfly silver straddle in PaineWebber's history. And I was able to, at the ripe old age of 25, pick up a six-figure commission. And I knew that if I really did my homework, there would be more of that sort of thing in the wings. So I specialized in fixed income, that's bonds, preferred stocks, that sort of thing. And then I bought a seat down at the Chicago Board of Trade in the world's largest commodity, T-bond futures market. And I was a trading advisor to large institutions like Colonial, Putnam, Fidelity, Van Camp and Barrett, Teachers Retirement System of the state of Illinois, Pennsylvania, HERS, large bond portfolios, and I was able to woo them with my grasp of how to hedge their portfolios. And in the pit, in the trading pit at the Chicago Board of Trade, where I stayed for 14 years, I traded my own account as a pit trader. I filled orders for my customers as a floor broker. I collected commissions, which are tenfold what the floor brokerage commissions are. And I also wrote a daily market letter called From the Floor of the Chicago Board of Trade that went out to dozens of my institutional clients. My market analysis and my trade recommendations were the subject of many investment policy committee meetings. It only takes place on Monday morning, and I was pretty well known throughout the fixed income markets. So let's pass. I used the money that I earned over those 14 years, and I bought a company, an industrial company outside the industry, MHD, who invented suspended arch wall refractory in 1914. We built 38,000 projects around the world and catered to the steel industry. The steel industry ultimately was shipped to China. We used to be the biggest in the world. America used to be the biggest steel producer in the world. Our ability to produce steel was one of the reasons we won World War I and World War II. And because of the America-hating globalists, the petro-dictators at the United Nations, and most especially the trial lawyers, we shipped our steel industry to China, and China is now 10 times what we are. And we have shipped key national security inventories abroad. The globalism that we that we think is so important to us may someday come back to haunt us when our ability to produce these key things are no longer something we can control here in the United States. Thank you, Environmental Protection Agency and the travelers. So, what I'd like to do is give an illustration of what a rig trade is. And I can only do that from my experience in the bond pit with the Chicago Board of Trade. So, a broker has his orders in a deck. And in his deck, there are stops. Let's say the market is trading at 99.30. And the broker turns to the broker against the law, turns to the traders on either side. He says, my stops are at 99.10. My sell stops are at 99.10. And so a group of locals can start getting short at 30 and 29 and 28 and push the market down to 10, buy the stops, cover their shorts, and reverse themselves and be the only longs in the market at 10. That's one form of rig trade. There's another form of rig trade where you, let's say, have 2,000 to sell them at 10 on the opening. Let's say the opening is 5 bid at 10. And you have 2,000 to sell at 10, 2,000 to buy at 5. And the market is fast on the opening. And you tell the guy standing next to you, or the 2 or 3 guys standing next to you, I sold you 2010 or 2005. I bought 2010. There is no risk, and everybody walks off with 5 ticks times 2,000. That's 31,000 a tick. So 60,000 times 5. Not a bad day's work for a riskless trade. That's the kind of riskless trade that is what happened in the foreclosure crisis. It's what happened when your home equity was stolen. It was all premeditated and orchestrated before anything happened. At this point, I think I'd like to ask anybody if they have any questions or challenges or anything of that nature, because I know I'm speaking to a very smart group of people.
Bob, one thing I would like you to touch on very briefly, this is Dan, is your experience in dealing with the Chicago Climate Exchange. You mentioned that to me yesterday, and I think people would like to listen.
That's Mr. Griffin, too. There's so much to talk about it. I'm happy to talk about it. So the trading pits at the Chicago Board of Trade, especially the bond pit, all of the pits, are they're octagonal, and around that octagon are booths, kind of like your corner bar, only hundreds of booths, where the people who deal with the customers or their brokers that are back in New York or San Francisco or wherever, those customers then are on the phone, and they're able to signal orders into the pit. So you can get execution of the transaction. And I was a vice president, 35-year-old vice president with Drexel Burnham Lambert. And standing elbow to elbow with me was Dr. Richard Sandor, who some call the father of financial futures. I would tend to disagree, but that's how he billed himself in order to get into customers' knickers. And he was a competitor. He was senior to me. He was tight with management. And I'm fortunate enough to have my uncle and my godfather, Gene D. Fanning, who was a very successful automobile dealer with 3 franchises. He was also the president of the Automobile Dealers Association. He was on the board of directors of the University of Notre Dame. And one of the accounts that I wanted, one of the big players, was Bill Miller at General Motors Pension Plan. And Miller would flip bonds and S&Ps and do massive size. And that was one of the creme de la creme of the accounts. I got it because I was good and because I had the right last name. And Dr. Richard Sandor stole my account. He pulled rank on me. And we stood next to each other until I couldn't take it anymore, and I took my book to a different firm. But I always knew that slime bag was somebody to keep an eye on. And then his name gets involved with this thing that from the get-go, from the original second, when they threw a reception at the Chicago Board of Trade to talk about this new concept called the Chicago Climate Exchange, I made it my business to understand what that was all about. And the best I could figure with my long track record in understanding complex financial instruments, the best I could figure is this slime bag was trying to figure out how to trade the air that we breathe and turn it into a derivative. And that's exactly what he was doing. He was going to charge for all of the noxious gases and carbon particulates and call that a carbon credit. And unfortunately, you folks will not be able to see this unless you get some sort of subpoena. But I followed the Chicago Climate Exchange's website. All the new memberships were sold to various coal-fired utilities in a form of extortion. If we're going to trade this stuff, you better buy a seat or a clearing firm or a membership because you're going to need it to survive. And following the Chicago Climate Exchange website, which is now expunged from the scrub from the internet, you will see that Sandor predicted that $10 trillion notional amount, $10 trillion of derivatives would trade on carbon credits per year once the exchange got up and running. Sandor ultimately sold out his interest in the Chicago Climate Exchange for $200 million. Another player that you folks may remember his name was the former chairman of Fannie Mae when it went down. Franklin Raines had a couple $100 million interest in the trading platform for carbon credit trading. And another fella who put up the money, this is important. The fellow who put up the initial seed money and gave it to Sandor to get this baby off the ground was a young community organizer who worked for the Joyce Foundation. He's on the board of directors of the Joyce Foundation. And that fella's name is Barack Hussein Obama. And Barack Obama gave Sandor the money from the Joyce Foundation to start the Chicago Climate Exchange. And part of the clearing process, please understand that I worked for no fewer than 6 chairmen of the Chicago Board of Trade, worked with many of them on various issues. Also worked with the chairman, and that might be a double title, the chairman of the Chicago Board of Trade Clearing Corporation. So the clearing process is very important. Whether you're clearing your trades through the Chicago Climate Exchange or the Chicago Board of Trade, whether it's carbon credits or T-bonds or S&Ps or wheat, beans, oil, cattle, you get it. Once the trade is done on the exchange, it's done with a member of the clearing corporation. Those are called member firms. Member firms hold everybody's accounts, charge them commissions, and keeps the margins in accordance with the rules. But when the buyer and seller comes together, coming from one clearing firm, one member firm, one broker, to the opposing side, when the buyer and seller meet, the money has to change hands. And it changes hands and is held by a bank at the Chicago Board of Trade that normally was somebody like the Northern Trust or the Continental Bank. And there were always major money center banks. You folks now probably know them as too big to fails. But when it came to clearing the transactions for the Chicago Climate Exchange, the named bank was a little bank on the south side of Chicago known as the Shore Bank. The Shore Bank failed during the crash of '08. It had to be bailed out. And there was a young lawyer who walked all over Chicago and got all sorts of loans, Community Reinvestment Act type loans, for the Shore Bank. And that young lawyer, that community organizer, was Barack Hussein Obama. So I think it is incumbent upon investigative reporters all over the place to find out why is this guy with an embedded financial conflict of interest out peddling global warming when all the scientists we can assemble are saying that it's a scam. Why is he peddling global warming when he should be recusing himself for financial conflict of interest? And who put up the seed money for the short bank that ultimately was taken down for a short period of time? And when the financial collapse hit, how much did the short bank get? And now that the short bank is in the same area, within walking distance of the old Oval Office, what is the microfinance that is taking place through the short bank or its successor? Who's putting up the money for that microfinance? And where is that microfinance going? To which foreign country? For what use? So what's the source and use of funds that goes from the shore bank? And does this young fellow who came from the Joyce Foundation, what financial interest does he have, if any, from the shore bank, since it was named as a clearing bank for the Chicago Climate Exchange? Got any more, Dan?
We're going to need to
Bob,
move
I
along.
think that's enough, and I don't believe we're going to do the question and answer right now, but later this evening, we may give you another call. There may be questions for you at that time, and if you would try to be somewhat available later this evening, we will be doing a Q&A at that time.
Guaranteed. My day is yours.
Okay, well, thank you, Bob. That was very enlightening, and I'm sure everyone